Joined now by my buddy Chad Withrow. I started doing radio with him, like 12 or 13 years ago now, Withrow?
It's been 2007, Clay. I think actually met in 2007, started the radio show in 2008. So, yeah, we're getting old, and we started this a long time ago together.
Yeah, and we started, and I might have told this story on the show before, at Withrow Zone. You can follow Chad Withrow at 104.5 The Zone there as we roll through the Tuesday edition of the program here. We started a show on Tuesday nights, and we met back when Tennessee was actually the last time Tennessee was in an SEC championship game, which probably neither one of us would have believed it would ever be so long again, and who knows when it's actually going to occur again. But it was 2007 when Tennessee was playing against LSU, and that was the year that LSU basically thought they were totally eliminated from being able to contend for the championship. I feel like that was the West Virginia fans out there listening right now. Was that the West Virginia loses to Dave Wanstead and Pitt game? And suddenly LSU got into the championship game and won it as a 2-loss team. And remember, that year LSU with Les Miles won the national championship. They lost 2 games in overtime. And they came back and won a game late against Tennessee. I think Tennessee was up like 14-7, threw a pick six, or maybe it was tied and they threw a pick six, whatever it was. It was a hard-fought win for LSU, and then they go on and win the national championship.
Yeah, Eric Ames threw a pick six to LSU. West Virginia lost to Pittsburgh. I want to say there was one other game that Saturday that swung.
Maybe
UCLA
beat USC or something like that. One of those kind of games.
It was something else crazy that happened for USC to get in that national championship game against Oklahoma that year, I believe it was, and then won the national championship with Les Miles. But crazy circumstances to get to that. And, Clay, you just gave me an idea. Maybe we're the ones who cursed Tennessee football.
Well,
ever since we met the night before the SEC championship game, Tennessee hasn't been close to getting back. So maybe it's us. Maybe we're the problem.
Yeah, certainly there's some people who definitely believe I'm the problem. And speaking of problems, so there's a bunch of different stories I want to get into with you. But I want to start with this controversy surrounding Vanderbilt. And the female kicker they brought out for the second half kickoff and everything that's gone on since then, and Derek Mason gets fired and all the other associated storylines. I spent a decent amount of time on yesterday's show and, kind of unpacking this and why it didn't make sense to me. And the thing that I focused on, and you're an NFL fan too, so you'll understand this analysis. In the NFL, they don't have big rosters, right? You look on the sideline. College football teams can have 20, 30, 40 guys who are never going to play that are on the sideline for games dressed out. And so it's usual that there's a kicker and there's a backup kicker. There's probably a punter and there's a backup punter. All those things are normal. In the NFL, it's fairly common that, let's say, your kicker strains a quad and isn't able to continue, and the punter might have to do it. It's probably every season this happens a couple of times, right? The punter hurts himself and somebody else has to come in and punt, usually the kicker or whatnot. So when I saw this whole Vanderbilt needs a kicker story start to emerge, I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. And then, like a lot of people, I watched on Saturday because I was like, well, I want to see, is she going to actually attempt field goals? Is she going to attempt extra points? It's an intriguing story for this Vanderbilt-Missouri game. And as I'm watching, they keep trotting out the punter, who actually was probably Vanderbilt's best player on the field on Saturday, and he punted 7 times, Withrow, for an average of 43 yards. And so as I'm watching, I'm thinking, wait a minute, it's a lot tougher to punt than it is to kick off in a game, right? Like if you told anybody out there listening right now, hey, you have 2 options. You can get a running start and go kick a ball on the field, or you can get the ball snapped to you, have to catch it, have everybody rushing at you to try to block a kick. You have to get the kickoff, and then you have to be the last line of defense in the event that the punt returner is trying to return it. It's a lot harder to punt in an NFL or a college game or a high school game for that matter than it is to be an actual kicker, right? Like just running up and kicking the ball off. So this story that Vanderbilt didn't have a kicker doesn't make sense to me because the punter could have clearly run up and popped the ball up in the air and kicked the ball a lot further than she did, right? Like this is not rocket science.
Well, and Clay, I know that you see this a lot. It seems that common sense goes out the window in how people react to stories. And there are so many media members nationally and locally here in Nashville, where I'm located in the media, that wanted so badly for this to be this sort of Arthur Ashe Courage Award moment with Sarah Fuller, that they're not asking the obvious questions. I have nothing against Sarah Fuller. I think it's a cool story that she went out there and she became the first Power 5 woman to play in a Power 5 game for a Power 5 school. I think that part of it's cool. I don't think it's great, and I don't think the story is great, and I think you're hitting on a few things. Harrison Smith, who's the punter at Vanderbilt, averaged 43 yards per punt, had a long of 53. Now, I've done some digging on this because I'm interested in it. He is not a good kicker. I talked to someone that was associated with him at Brentwood Academy, south of Nashville, where he played. Not a good kicker. He can drop kick, so he can actually punt the ball off the ground and does it pretty well. Now, I asked this person, could he go out there and squib kick it to the 37, the way Sarah Fuller did? And they said absolutely. They could have asked him to do that, and he probably could have gone out and attempted extra points as well. Vanderbilt also has a reserve defensive back, and the SEC Network broadcast team mentioned this, but they have a reserve defensive back that's a sophomore that kicked all through high school for his high school team. That was available also. You could also go for 2. So this whole narrative that they had to bring her on, right, that they were forced to do it, they had to do it, this was the only option. I know for a fact that the former NBA kicker, a prestigious private school in Nashville, who was a good kicker, reached out to the Vanderbilt coaches. He's a student at Vanderbilt and was offering up his services to go kick. And they basically shut down. There was no competition. There was no real tryout. They shut it down, and then Sarah Fuller was tweeting out, pictures of her in uniform, and Vanderbilt was hyping it up also. So, look, I think 2 things can be true. It's a cool story that she had an opportunity to do this. It's cool to see her go out there and kick in a game, and it's also clearly a publicity stunt. But by whoever it was that decided this was going to be a thing, I'm not sure who, I just don't buy that this was your only option. If you want to argue the way Vanderbilt coaches were today, that, well, she gave us the best option to win, I don't necessarily buy that. I also think that it's quite the extreme when you think of other options they could have had to go out and kick in this game.
Yeah, and look, to me it becomes even more apparent to be like, and look, I'm not opposed to positive stories, right? But don't sell me something that is artificial and claim that it's authentic, right? Like, everybody out there has gone into Times Square,
I'm not opposed to positive stories, by the way, Clay. It should be on your tombstone. Yeah. I'm not opposed to positive stories.
Yeah, some people are like, well, why do you even ask questions like this? Because I care about authenticity, right? If you're selling me on this was the best chance we had to win a football game, I'm not buying that, right? And also this ties into it even more. She addressed the team at halftime. I don't know how many locker rooms you've been in your life, Withrow. I know you've been in a bunch. And I have, and I bet almost everybody out there, regardless of where you have played, whether it's soccer, whether it's football, whether it's basketball, whatever sport you might have been in when you've been in a locker room. If somebody who isn't on the team and has never actually stepped foot on the field with you, blood, sweat, and tears throughout the season, suddenly gives you a lecture at halftime about how you're not cheering enough on the sideline and how you aren't excited enough when first downs are happening, I'm sorry, I'm tuning it out. And if that person is a flippin' kicker, I would love out there for right now, if you have ever had a kicker, if you're a football player, any level, high school, college, pro, I bet there isn't a single kicker out there who has said, hey, I need to address the team at halftime. And if they did, it better have been like Adam Vinatieri, a Hall of Fame greatest kicker who has ever lived, right? Kind of generational talent. And even then, I think a lot of guys would roll their eyes. This girl addressed the team and ripped them, and she had never actually played in a game yet when she did it. She hadn't played a snap. And the way that Vanderbilt played, they played their worst game all season, and to me, it was like the team was rolling its eyes and saying, we feel like the fix is in.
Well, and can you imagine, and not even sports, take the sports thing aside for a second. Imagine if Barry in accounting came into a department head meeting, and he had just been with a company for 4 days.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
And these department heads had been with this company for years, multiple years. They had seen the ups. They had seen the downs. They had been there for 12 hours a day. They're trying to pull this company from the depths of despair. They're trying to turn it around for this company. And Barry, who comes over from Cracker Barrel, where he was an accountant, and Cracker Barrel was doing well, but not quite at the level of this new company he works with, decided that, hey, this is my moment. I'm going to take my chance. This is my one shot. I'm going to address this management team and tell them how to get things done. I mean, I give Sarah Fuller credit in that the confidence it takes to ask to address the team and tell them, hey, this is how it's done on a championship team. I just won the SEC championship with my women's soccer team, and we have enthusiasm for each other. And we're getting a first down on the sideline. I'm the only one over there cheering. And the fact that the coaches and players allowed it, and Clay, not only that, a Vanderbilt coach told a reporter, Sarah Fuller told a reporter that a coach came up to her in the second half and said, you know, Sarah, what you said at halftime, I've been wanting to say that all year. Thank you so much for saying that. This is a coach. This is a paid coach for Vanderbilt saying that the girl who came over from the soccer team to have one kickoff, that her halftime pep talk was something he wanted to say all year, and he didn't. That is the biggest embarrassment of the program.
The whole thing is ridiculous. How about the fact that you talk to the media and tell them what you said? Like, the sanctity of the locker room typically extends to, what's said in the locker room. We don't really go to the media and tell them what was said. I think this thing was recorded. I think it was set up. I think we're going to see a ridiculous ESPN 30 for 30 hagiography on this. And the fact, like, they're going to reenact the kick, and it's going to turn into one that, like, went into the first row in the back of the end zone when they make the Disney special about it, instead of like a little, dink kick. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. But the analogy that you gave is a great one. The analogy that I would make is like, this is as if, we have people sitting in on the show sometimes who are not on the show. And it would be like if instead of going to Danny G or Dub or Roberto or Eddie, all the people who regularly work on this show, if we had a random dude who was on the show and he just started talking over me, right? Like, this is my show. And he's never been on the show. Nobody knows who he is. And we're talking about Monday Night Football. And he just steps in and he's like, hey, I got like 10 minutes. I want to talk about the game if I could. And I'll be like, excuse me? Like, this is my, and then he was like, here's what I think that you do wrong on your show. Right. And then, like, everybody's just out there kind of like looking around like, wait a minute, is this OutKick with Clay Travis? Or is this some random dude who's literally never been on the show before? And then he's just going to start talking for 10 minutes and expect me to listen, and that I've learned something from him, despite the fact that for years I have been doing radio on this show, and he's never done it. And he just comes in and he's like, at my local show and we may have an affiliate there, so I apologize, nothing against it. But in my local show in Peoria, Illinois, this is what we did, and this is how we ended up winning the prestigious Peoria Marconi Award. All right. I mean, congratulations. But I kind of think that that's kind of the equivalent of girls soccer versus major college athletics, or really, frankly, anything other than football and maybe basketball. There's no real comparison, right? If a diver gets up and they're like, hey, this is how we do the diving stories. Or if somebody out there is like, hey, this is how we handle track, and this is how the team works together on track. I'm not that interested in how your team does. It's crazy to me. All right, now.
Well, there's so many different layers to this, Clay. And think of it this way also, because I'm sure the people on Twitter are going to call you a caveman and a sexist and everything else for everything that you're saying, and they're probably going to say the same about me. I'm a father of two daughters. Yeah. Okay, and we're getting a lot of this from sports media members of, now I can look at my daughter and tell her that you can do anything in life. You can do anything. And I'm thinking to myself, what an insult it is for those dads that what they're saying about women's sports is that it's not all that important. If you were then saying, the moment that I could tell my daughter she could do anything was when Sarah Fuller had a second-half kickoff in a 41-0 football game. A young woman who just won an SEC title at Vanderbilt. We just had a woman appointed to the Supreme Court. That's a moment where you look at your daughter and say, hey, you can, do anything. There's been multiple women that have been appointed to the Supreme Court. Look at all the different things. The 99 U.S. women's national soccer team captivated an entire country. That's a moment where you can say, hey, little girl, you can do anything. The whole thing is just very odd to me. And again, it's nothing against Sarah Fuller. She's really done nothing wrong in this.
Well,
but
except for suggesting, like that, to me, it's really weird that she thought she needed to address the team. Like that's, to me, way outside the bounds.
And that may go.
And that's more of an indictment. That's more of an indictment. Yeah, right. That's more of an indictment of the coaching staff than it is her. Like Derek Mason's like, yeah, I do think you should talk to the whole team and tell them they stink and they don't cheer enough on the sideline. Really? Like that to me is crazy. And by the way, here's the official release. They named her co-special teams player of the week. And I'm glad you made that analogy. Like, I've got 3 sons, so I tell them they can do whatever they want, as any parent should. But I don't want to tell one of my kids that they should aspire to do something and be rewarded for it only because of their identity, right? And not because of their overall talent. And here is what I'm talking about. In this release that they sent out from Vanderbilt University, she took the opening kickoff of the second half against the Tigers as her, this is a direct quote from Vanderbilt University, as her perfectly executed kick sailed 30 yards and was downed at the Missouri 35-yard line. That entire paragraph is written by Vanderbilt University, and it's so absurdly ridiculous that I want to read it again, all right? And I'm a double Vanderbilt alum. So I went to grad school and got 2 different graduate degrees at Vanderbilt. I love the university. I want to make that clear. But whoever wrote this section here, she took the opening kickoff of the second half against the Tigers as her perfectly executed kick sailed 30 yards and was downed at the Missouri 35-yard line. If you kick the ball out of bounds on an opening kick, you get the ball, the other team does, at the 40, and every coach slams down his headset and curses the kicking staff to the moon, right? Like they're all furious. The intentional plan here was to give a team that you were already losing to by 21 points the ball 5 yards worse than the absolute worst case scenario kick. And that is a kick that sailed, and that's a kick that deserves credit, and that's a kick where somebody gets named the co-special teams player of the week. I mean, this is crazy. I feel like I'm living in an upside-down world.
Do we want equality, or do we want to reward someone because of their identity and because they're the first? And that's where that's where I think this is a cool story, and it could have been a great story. The great story is the girl who kicks for her small local high school throughout high school, is a decent kicker, walks on to a major program, and because of COVID quarantines or whatever, gets a shot and goes in and kicks and does well. I just don't get the same Disney sense of feel-good story for a girl who joined the team midway through the week at the end of a losing season where Vanderbilt's probably not going to win a game, who just won a soccer championship for the school and goes and hits I'm trying to get with the wording of the press release, a perfectly executed ball that sailed to the 37-yard line, bounced, and was down to the 35-yard line. It's just, I think anyone with any common sense, take any bias out of it, anything else, if you have any common sense, it's okay to acknowledge some of these inconsistencies. There was a local host in Nashville who compared it to Jackie Robinson in breaking Major League Baseball, and I'm thinking, are you kidding me? I mean, just the insanity of some of this drives me crazy. I know it does you as well.